Get that electric guitar off my folk stage. Guys, the year is 1965. At a folk festival, Bob Dylan is ready to go on with an electric guitar. Pete Seeger, famed folk legend, wonderful human being, one of my heroes, threatens to take an axe to the electrical supply because in the folk world, electric guitars are persona non grata. This is a funny story in hindsight because what difference did it make to have an electric guitar on a folk stage other than it opened up new artistic avenues for a moribund, stagnant art form. Now, my degree is in art photography, and if you don't know me, I'm David Miller, a multimedia artist in Los Angeles, but I did go to college for art photography, and I started in the film era and ended in the digital era. I got to watch firsthand all of these kind of pointless, meandering discussions between professors and students about whether digital was worth anything. Clearly, everyone who had this "you have to learn in the darkroom" mentality, they're irrelevant, totally irrelevant. And things that they thought you could only understand by growing up in the darkroom era, like tonality and archivalness, the digital equivalent of that, people learned it and could perform it as a function. Now, in the process of going through art school, I learned a lot about photo history. And one of the weird parts of art history is whenever there's a new art form and the gatekeepers of the era shut it down, keep it out of the galleries, keep it out of the museums, say it's not real. In photography's case, it was mechanical reproduction. That's what everybody called it. And the painters of the 1800s feared it was going to put them out of business because a lot of what they did was going town to town and making portraits of wealthy patrons. And guess what? Photography axed that business. They no longer were traveling painters who went and did realistic portraits and had those years of struggle and education pay off. And the people who could adapt changed what they painted. And the genre of painting changed. It became Impressionism, Modernism, Cubism, Futurism, Surrealism, Postmodernism. It investigated new avenues and became a different thing. People still have paintings in museums and galleries. And I went to an event, Cheech Marin, who is a contributor to the Mesa Art Center where I used to work, and I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, well, Chandler, Arizona, but Cheech Marin came and gave a talk, and he would say something like, everybody tells me that painting is dead, and I go into museums and all I see are paintings. Just because a genre changes or morphs doesn't mean it's dead, and just because new technology alters what we've been making up to that point doesn't mean that you can't adapt as an artist too. So of course I'm talking about AI, and but I wanted to get that preface out of the way because there's a long history of gatekeeping from many sources, not just art critics and art historians and curators, but there's gatekeeping all over the place. And I'm seeing that gatekeeping running totally rampant on any discussion about AI, particularly my own YouTube videos, but I'm fine with it. If you got some negative comments about AI to put in there, it just boosts my engagement, so thank you. What are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers are people that keep out some things and let some things into whatever kind of elite group people want to get part of. Now, gatekeepers aren't inherently bad. I work in schools, and we have a front desk that keeps out weirdos and people who are predatory and people who are known to be dangerous, and it allows in people who are supposed to be there, adults and kids alike. If I was one of the Zine Fest organizers, a lot of Zine Fests give preference to people of color, LGBTQ, so on and so forth. And as somebody who's white, Caucasian, I'm generally not accepted into Zine Fest anymore. I'm okay with that because the reason why they have that gatekeeping, why they're upfront about it, is because they want to give platforms to people who generally do not have platforms. You know, in a limited amount of space on their zine tables, this is how they're accepting people. Now, you know, I've had friends who are kind of right-wing and would call that reverse racism or whatever, but I've got plenty of outlets to sell my zines. I understand that. And I understand that most of history and society has benefited people like me more so than others, so I understand why that is. Other gatekeeping stuff, well, you know, Marvel and DC are going to hire people of a certain professionalism and also people who will, you know, elevate their brand, hopefully, and not ruin it. There's plenty of creators who maybe are like kind of wild and think outside of the box, but they would do things that would tarnish what they're trying to do. And sometimes they publish things that tarnish what they're trying to do. There was Batman issues where, you know, his silhouette of his penis is featured in the comic. It's like bizarre, weird. Don't do that. There's gatekeeping where I like to work with a certain kind of model and people who approach it with a certain mentality, like they're very emotive and ethereal, and it's suitable for my art. So when I get requests to shoot with other people that don't fit with what I'm doing, I don't do it, you know, or I do it for money and it's not very good, and I already know this about myself. And of course, when we have things like movies, games, Airbnbs, Peerspace, Amazon, whatever you need a review on, a qualified reviewer is somebody who is a gatekeeper, and they can tell you if this product or place or service is inferior or lacking or doesn't follow through with what it says it's going to do. Like, that's all important to us. And one of the reasons why society kind of runs in the borderline honesty that it does is because of public review, peer review, what gatekeepers are doing to maintain standards. So I do not dismiss gatekeepers entirely. Where they fail is when they are attached to upholding old standards that we know things change over time, right? It was standard for people to have asbestos in their homes because it was a fire retardant and it would like stop your home from being on fire. And then we found out it was actually something that causes cancer. So that standard changes. Where a gatekeeper fails is when its dedication is really just about what it already knows up to a certain point. And what I mean by that is when I went to college, I would have teachers who their entire set of opinions and why they like this movie, that movie, these films, this way of doing photography, this style of photography, their prejudices were entirely based on how they came up and what they learned in college and what they heard, and they never took to any like critical thinking or growth in new areas. So when I make a video and I sound openly critical of Miyazaki, or I talk about, you know, Martin Scorsese saying Marvel films aren't cinema, it's not like I don't understand what they're saying, you know, in their critiques, but I also think they have a fixed idea of what art, cinema, drawing, animation, whatever it is, and they're not open to what else it offers. Martin Scorsese, I mean, he did Hugo, and he did The Irishman, and he did many other movies that are all wonderful, but those two in particular incorporated this like newer technology of 3D and effects and green screen and de-aging, and he did great things with him. Those innovations would not have happened without other more commercial, maybe less cinema films exploring what you can do with this technology. And the companies that help develop it need a market for it, so they need to make commercial products to get that to the point where an artist can use it. That could be a Marvel film, that could be, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, what was done in like Lord of the Rings and Avatar. There's always like a commercial precedent for a technology that people who are not commercial minded but are like creative artist minded, they put the art before the commerce. They take this technology and run with it, but they can only do it when it's affordable enough for the artist to use, and when that mental boundary stopping you from exploring something new, you got to drop your own mental boundary. Everyone who is out there saying AI slop this, AI slop that, AI slop this, they're just parroting mechanical reproduction. That's what photography is. Push button music, that's what electronic music is. Cheating, that's what sampling is, and that's what anything that green screen, digital stuff, it's just entirely off the grid because it doesn't count as art. You are entirely wrong if you subscribe to that mentality. I don't mind if somebody doesn't like things that are made in AI. My big exploration in AI came from my son sending me a Julian Casablancas Voids album and me not liking it and us complaining about the artwork. And then I'm like, well, you know what? Julian Casablancas is a smart guy, and I think I'm going to explore what else is out there. I've already been using, generative fill in Photoshop to expand the boundaries of my images. I'd already been using AI masks in Lightroom to edit hundreds of photos at once instead of, one at a time where I have to mask everything off. And I'd already been using ChatGPT and other kinds of text tools for organizational purposes. But the more I explore what you can do with AI and creativity, the more I fully embrace it and have been able to incorporate it as a parts factory, as a full production studio where I can now have like soundtracks made to order, all these other things, And then just in the greater world of what we can do with AI, the last video I watched was a BBC one where it talked about interpreting animal languages. So we will get to the point where we can speak to animals and they can speak to us. And that is something never achieved in human history. Had this very lopsided relationship with animals for thousands of years, and in years or decades that could completely change. And if you could speak to an animal that you normally eat, would you eat it? Would you still think it's okay to enslave it? I don't know. I don't think so, but I also know in human history there's a lot of things that we've been able to talk to, and we also had no problem killing and enslaving it. You can do medical trials that would have taken centuries in weeks. You can make all these tools of accessibility for people who have disabilities, the blind, the deaf, paraplegics. You can eventually have superpowers that we've dreamed about forever, like telepathy and regrowing limbs. And I'm just really excited about the potential of things. I'm not stupid and I'm not blind that it'll get used for war and all these other awful things. You know, the internet caused huge disruptions. Social media caused huge disruptions. The Industrial Revolution caused huge disruptions. It changed society forever, but this is what we're living in. You're an artist out there. Don't be afraid to integrate AI or whatever new technologies there are out there. Don't listen to people who are like, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. It's not art. You know, social media doesn't count. You need to be pure, blah, blah, blah. This is reactionary mindset. These people will all be wrong. All be wrong. There is almost no point in aligning yourself with people who are completely wrong about everything in history. And if you are kind of like a gatekeeper or a critic, and you're listening to this, I'm not here really to persuade you one way or another, because, you know, you're doing your job and I'm doing my job and I'm expressing what I think. But objectively, I think it is better, if you're a gatekeeper or critic, to keep an open mind and to speak to what's going on in society as it is, and realize that, you know, there's a hunger between both sort of like the artistic elite and the public to engage with what's really happening now. If you did an exhibit in an art museum, and I've seen this happen, where it was like modern video game art and concept art and character design, and, you know, maybe even showcased the creators, like the people who invented Mario and the people who invented Metal Gear Solid, and I'm sorry because they're Japanese names and I don't want to mess them up on camera, but if you did an exhibit of that material, and you did an exhibit that was like a retrospective of Andy Warhol or Vincent van Gogh, guess who's gonna have the bigger draw? And guess what speaks more to the times we live in? It's gonna be the video game art, it's gonna be the concept art, and that's not bad and that's not wrong. I have my own opinions about video games, how they suck productivity, but I've also understood that my opinions are more with my personal engagement with video games and nothing to do with the levels of insane creativity and the market it provides for artists who make this stuff, and the entertainment value it gives to all the people who engage with it as seriously as I might have photography, music, movies. And yeah, keep an open mind. Technology and tools are part of your life, whether you want them to be or not. You don't have to use what you don't like, and you don't have to like what you don't like, but you running around calling AI slop, mechanical reproduction, it's pointless, utterly pointless. And on the occasion that I've investigated somebody who's carried one of these opinions, like if it comes up on an Instagram story by somebody I met at a comic artist thing or whatever, I'll go back and see what they've done, and they're not Miyazaki. Let's just put it that way. They're not Martin Scorsese. There's nothing to scream about, and I think maybe inheriting a use of some digital tools, if it's Procreate, if it's, you know, generating hands and comping them in with whatever, like, that might be helpful and might be useful. Best of luck in your own creative endeavors. Talk to you next time.